All right, so welcome back. This is day 6. This is the final synchronous session of this STI, the Google Slides STI. So what we'll do is we'll start by giving you a sense of where you're going to submit all the work, how you're going to turn in the projects, and then go through a couple last little tidbits about sort of recording presentations if you're doing it virtually in this kind of e-learning situation. And then we'll just sort of do like an open Q&A. So what I'll do is I'll jump into the blog, and on the blog, we've got this participants project document, which I've now shared with you, and all of you now have editing access to this. What this is going to do, it's just going to open up a Google Slides doc, name, project, and notes. So essentially what this is going to be is you're going to put your name in the name. Your project is going to be one of two things. Your project can be the entire folder that we've made, because let's say you have a bunch of different elements of the different pieces that we've put into it. So it could be a link to the entire folder, and then the notes would be an explanation of, this is the folder where I've tried a whole bunch of things from the Google Slides styles, the virtual classroom, the Ignite presentation, whatever. I've tried a whole bunch. Or you can, I know a lot of you spend a ton of time on the virtual classroom, so maybe that was kind of where you took that deep dive. So maybe it would just be the link to the virtual classroom with the notes explaining that you're kind of focusing your project on this, on the one area that we talked about. That was kind of where you put the most effort. So that's what this sheet is basically for. Now, in terms of actually getting these links that you would put in, if you're going to do a folder, let's say you've just been trying out a bunch of stuff and it's fine. I want this course to be useful, and I want these projects to be legit. Like, I want them to be things that you've actually like spent time on. So if you're somebody who made the folder and has a ton of stuff in there that you've been kind of just playing around with, totally fine, because you've been exploring it and you've been trying the different techniques, you've been trying the different things. So you would come up here to the little drop down arrow and you would get the share link. And what you would do in here is you would share it with me, Fran, and Anne-Marie. And when you share it with us, you would get the link, and you basically then would just copy this link. Right now, this isn't shared with anybody, but I just copy this link, and you would just come in here and just paste it, and then explain, what it is, that it's a folder containing a bunch of things you've tried and whatnot. It doesn't have to be more than a couple of sentences of explanation. If it's the virtual classroom, or if it's one particular slides file that you're going to share, instead of doing the present, like the publish to the web, just do a traditional share on this and do the same thing. Just copy that link. So that way, when we look at it, we can actually see like the slides and sort of kind of look through. We don't have to be editors on it. Viewing is fine. But at least that way we could scroll through and kind of see how you like the different slides might have been set up and stuff like that. So basically, those are the two things. Just grab either the share link for the folder or the share link for the one particular file you took that super deep dive on, and just paste that in with a brief, and I'll make sure these aren't all bolded. Just paste that in with a brief explanation of what it is. The virtual classroom, I spent the most time on this because it spoke to me the most, and I'm going to use it going forward. Or here's a folder with a bunch of stuff. I'm totally overwhelmed. He gave us too much work to do. I have no idea what's going on, but I've got a lot of practice files, whatever. And that's basically it in terms of the project. In terms of things that we've done, we talked a lot about the virtual classroom. We've talked a lot about, these kind of different activities where you have these little bugs that, take you back to different grids where you can jump around and move around different things. We've talked about, traditional presentations and sort of laying out, like this was last week where we talked about, making things look good, simple and clean, where you have centered photos, you have balanced photos, where you make sure that you're having, equidistant space between them, where you're leaving a bit of a border around. So you're not putting anything off to the edge of the slide, because when things go to the edge of the slide, the viewer, the mind sort of wonders if you're cutting something off. But making these things clean and clear. One of the things too with these little bugs down here in the bottom we talked about last week was the beauty of the master slide, because when you go into the master slide, you can set your formatting, your font sizes, colors, things like that for every single slide. You can also add these little boxes that have the link back to the table of contents or your email address or a link to your website, whatever it may be, you can add that there, and then it automatically gets added to every single slide. So you don't have to keep adding it manually. That's the master slide, which is good. One of the other things we talked about is in terms of having things look like this instead of in just present mode. But the way you do that is you don't just give the share link. That's actually file published to the web. And what that does is that basically gives people a link to the slides file automatically in present mode. So they're not seeing the slide list on the left. They're not seeing, the file edit view menus across the top. This is also where you would get the embed code for putting it on a SchoolWires page. And then that way it would be in present mode on that SchoolWires page or on that blog if you're using something like Campus Press or Blogger. One of the nice things about staying in the Google environment is if you're using a Google site and you just insert the presentation, it will automatically be in that present mode, sort of that publish to the web present mode, so nobody sees anything going on the sides. And basically the reason why you do that is just to make it clean and clear. The purpose of the slides file, the presentation, is just to have it be this clean slide. People who are watching this or interacting with it or learning from it, they don't need to see sort of all the stuff that you've done on the side. They don't need to see the file edit view menus. They don't need to see all that. So we use that publish to the web feature to get it so it's clean and it just looks like this. So they're not necessarily even realizing that they're engaging with a slides file, but that they're just engaging with this visual and they're able to click around on different things. Same thing with virtual classroom. We talked about having some consistency on that in terms of knowing that there's always going to be, the rug is my little back to my table of contents button, or always having consistency of, if you see a list of items, that's what you click on. If you see a quote poster, that's not clickable. It's just inspirational words. If you see something, it means this, and sort of training, you build it, and then just like a regular classroom, you work with your kids and you sort of walk them through it and explain to them the expectations, explain to them how the room functions. Because just like a normal room, you have that opening lesson of, here's the rug, here's the reading center, here's your mailbox, here's whatever, here's how you enter the room, here's how you leave the room. Same idea. It's like you can build these virtual spaces, but you still have to approach them in a similar fashion to your regular classroom, in that you have to help the kids and teach the kids how to interact with that space. And what's cool is you could put things like videos, YouTube videos in, just by going to insert video, and then you can resize it. And I basically made this TV screen, computer looking screen, and I just resized my YouTube video to fit that space. So then it looks like I'm actually playing the video on that TV, even if I'm not. One thing about the videos in here, and I don't remember if we touched on it, but when you click on a video, you have this format options button. And the format options button will let you do, size and stuff, but it really, video playback is the best use of it, because you'll notice that it actually has time in and time out. Meaning you can have a 5-minute video, but let's say you wanted it to start at, minute 1 and go to minute 3, you can set that. Now this is an old video. Let me grab a new, that was just a video that I had deleted. But so if I copy the link to this one, and if I were to come over to my virtual classroom, and if I were to insert my video, I find it, and then I insert. Now you can also insert from Drive, which is nice. I like YouTube for all my videos, and I like putting all my videos on YouTube because YouTube is a video host. So it's going to play. Again, it's going to be accessible. You don't have to worry about permissions for the video and things like that, because if you just put it on YouTube and make it public, that it's accessible and viewable by anybody. Drive, you have to worry about who has permissions for things. Can they see it? Can they not? And this is where over here, if I wanted this video to start at, 1 minute and then end at 2 minutes, not that. I can do that. And then I can also have it, autoplay if I wanted to. So meaning that when they click on the slide, it automatically plays. You don't have to. Let's say I do this, and then when I come over here and I go to present, it'll automatically jump to number 1. So you can see it automatically started playing at number 1, and then at 1 minute, and then when it gets to that 2 minute or 3 minute, whatever my cap was, it'll just stop playing at that time. So that's a handy little trick to kind of integrate these different aspects into Google Slides. Because again, none of these things sort of operate in isolation. It's kind of using these different tools and then using something like Google Slides as kind of your broadcast medium for it, but you're able to kind of weave in these different aspects. And then when we talked about briefly the traditional presentation in terms of presenting, so if you wanted to present this, let me get rid of my cupcake. That was for a lesson I was doing earlier. I borrowed my traditional presentation file. When you do the file publish to the web, you can set time auto advancing. So meaning that the minute they hit the play button, it's going to auto advance on that time frame. And you can make it, any number of things. What you could also do is if you just go to present mode, there's a gear in the bottom sort of toolbar, presenter toolbar. And if you click the gear, you can set the auto timings. Once I move all the Zoom windows out of the way, you can set the auto advance time, and I can set it for every second. And then once I hit play, now this nothing happens. So if I click this little advance button, the timings won't matter. But once I hit the play button, now what's going to happen is every second the slides are going to advance. So if you wanted to do something that had, oops, I got to pause it. So if you wanted to do a lesson or a presentation, like we were talking about last week, like the Ignite presentations we do with the kids, we have those run every 15 seconds. So what that means is when they're playing and when we start the presentation, we hit play, they can talk to the slide and they know that the slide is going to auto advance. And by doing something like an auto advance timing on a traditional presentation, it takes a lot of practice ahead of time to sort of rehearse the script. But then what it does is in the actual presentation itself, it keeps it moving and it allows the presenter to not even look at the slides or worry about advancing. They know the visuals behind them are going to automatically transition. So it takes it away from the idea of each slide being independent and really forces the person creating the presentation to make it a cohesive narrative, a cohesive story, so that if the slides are auto advancing every 15 seconds, even if what you say is a little bit ahead or a little bit behind of the visual, it doesn't matter because it's about the overarching concept or the overarching story by itself. And if you did, here's a little trick. So we did talk about a couple of tricks. One was when you go to share, if you wanted to force a copy, when you copy this link, and if I were to paste this in, you would see that at the end, it's got this edit question mark USB Google sharing. If you delete that and just write the word copy, that will then force the person getting that link. It'll force them to make a copy before they can even see the presentation. That'll work for a document. It'll work for any Google file. So slides, sheets, docs, drawing, forms. It'll make a copy. Then they can't mess with yours. They can only make a version of the copy. The flip side is they don't see any updates that you might make, but that's a little bit of a trick. One of the other tricks is if you are doing the publish to the web and, oops, wrong button. If you're doing the publish to the web and you get publish to the web, and let's say you publish it and you get that auto timing 3 seconds and you copy this link, you'll notice that at the very end of this, it actually says delay MS equals 3000. That's milliseconds. So it's telling you that the delay is 3 seconds. So if you wanted to, you could actually change that to be whatever you wanted. So even though Google in slides only gives you a fixed amount of like 3 seconds, 5, 10, 15, whatever, you could change that up. You could just publish it and then manually come in here and make this, I don't know, like 300 milliseconds. So that means that's like super fast. Go and do that. But just meaning like if you decided that 15 seconds was too fast, but 30 seconds was too slow, and you wanted to do 20 seconds, you would just do 20,000 milliseconds, and then now it's going to auto advance every 20 seconds. You could also do fractions, if you wanted something to go every 5.5 seconds, 5,500, things like that. So that's sort of little tricks to play around with that. One of the other things we talked about early on was the fact that you can take these presentations, and if you wanted to make them into, let's say, like a worksheet type situation, you can actually take your presentation and go to File, Page Setup, and instead of widescreen, you can change it to custom, and you can change your presentation to 8.5 by 11, and then it'll actually rotate the page and it'll make it look like a piece of paper. So that's a way where if you wanted to approximate something that looked like a book or a workbook, something like that, notebook, you could do that. And then instead of just putting a worksheet page on there, because then it could get moved around by the kids and they could change. But if you did a slide background, if you change the background and you chose an image, and then what you could do is you could upload, and I have, a workbook page on here, math workbook page 3. So when I upload that, what happens is it puts it in as the background so it can't be manipulated. But then what's good is, now it's obviously behind the presentation, which is bad, but then you have this space around the side with which you can work. So if I do this again and I get a clean slide, and I might even do something like this, and I'll show you why in a second. If I did the slide background, and if I change the image and browse and workbook, and if I put this up, this is literally a scan from a page. Now, what you could do is, the reason why I left this box down here is you might be, directions for students. You might give them some information. You might give them some directions, some reminders, things like that, where you put that in there. And then what they can do is they can't mess with this picture, but what they can do is they can do things like add in shapes where, they can write the answer. They can add in, arrows where they point things out. They can have their circle, they want to highlight the wrong element. They highlight it with a circle, and they can use the transparency on the circle to make it hollow, and then they can highlight and make it red, and that could be part of the directions. Any shape you put on, make it green if it's correct. And if I had the wrong answer, make it red as a strike through or something like that. You can also click on any shape with a line, and you can make the lines thicker if you want them to be more visible. But it's just different ways that you can use different aspects of Google Slides to create different things, to create workbook sheets, to create, virtual classrooms, to create choose your own adventure type things, whatever it is, utilizing the links. And to make something a link, it's just a matter of clicking on the object, because everything is an object, and using the link button. And you could link to a web page or a slide in this presentation, and you could have it go to whatever slide you wanted to. So if I clicked on lesson 2 and I said apply, then when I'm in present mode, I just click on this and it's going to jump back to the other slide. So you can use these different features to make the slideshow more interactive and more engaging. The one sort of last quick overview thing I will cover, and then I'll pause for some questions, is when you're inserting an image, you can search the web and you can grab a picture and insert it. All of these are high quality, fair use, free to reuse images. They're copyright free. You want to make sure you take the corners of the images. You don't want to take the middle of the images, because then it distorts the image. You only want to take the corners when you're resizing to keep the image in its original aspect ratio. And then the red lines are your guidelines. So it actually shows you that you're centered on the slide. If the red line doesn't go all the way through, so when I do this, the red line doesn't go all the way through the slide. That means it's centered on the item that's touching. So it's centered on the text box below it, not the whole slide. Because if I come over here, then it goes all the way through. This red line means the edge of the picture is aligned with the edge of the text box. It's just a way to sort of keep things neat and orderly, because a lot of it is about being neat and orderly. And then you have formatting options where you can, recolor and change the layout, which changes the copyright, makes it a different object. Or you can go back to none or white, and then you can also, let me undo that. You can add things like, transparency to make it a little bit lighter, change the brightness, drop shadow, reflection. So you have lots of ways to manipulate all the different items. So I would say that that's sort of a quick down and dirty overview of all the stuff we've covered. Are there any particular questions? Just shout them out.
I had a question the last time, or I forget if it was last time or 2 times ago. You showed us that really cool art gallery,
Mm-hmm.
and I was trying to sort of like imitate that in one of my sections of my virtual classroom, and I couldn't figure out how they did the. They kind of made it look like the aspect. Um, they changed um, the shape of the image to make it look like it was on the wall,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't figure out how to do that.
So I'm pretty sure what they did, and then Melanie, we'll get to you after. I'm pretty sure what they did was, and you can do this with any picture. Let me get one that's not the apple. Let me get one that's art. So if I take this one and I put this one in, one thing you can do with photos is, once it loads, is you can take the photo and you have up here this crop tool where you can cut out parts of the images. So if you crop it, you get these little, I gotta click on this one first actually. You can crop it and I get these little black bars, and what I can do is it's not so much cropping as like masking. I can kind of hide elements of it. But if you check this little drop down, I can mask the image and I can change the shape of it. So I can actually do that, so then it becomes a circle. So I don't know how she did it, but I would imagine that she probably came in and did something like this,
Yeah, that's what I was missing actually.
and then like rotated it.
There's a
And
trapezoid one.
yeah, there's a bunch of different shapes in there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it would just be a matter of figuring out. I mean, it's all the shapes. You could mask it as like whatever you wanted to, which is kind of fun.
Is there any way to add an image within the borders of an already existing shape? Do you know what I mean by that?
Sort of like you're saying, put one in here by the like in the teeth of the stars.
No, like if you just went to your regular shape and put a circle, is there any way you can insert an image within that circle?
Not officially.
Okay.
So the two ways to do it would be, if you have this image and
Yeah,
you want the image to be in the circle, you just choose the circle.
and then drag it
and
in.
and then right, so then that makes it like that. Alternately, what you could do is, if you wanted it to be like a background or like a frame, yeah, you would take this and kind of put it over it,
Right.
and then make it maybe a little bit larger, and then arrange, order, send it
Yeah.
back. And then you could tweak this one and you can like get it sort of, where it needs to be. Then what you could do is sort of click and drag to highlight both of them,
Right.
and you could arrange and group. So that way you could be able to move them as a single item. One thing when you're doing something like this, it's tough to be precise sometimes. So two tricks are, use your little zoom, because you notice when I go to my magnifying glass, I'm only looking at this slide at 56% of actual size. If you go to 100, it's much clearer. I can click on this, and when you use your arrow, you're like, well, that jumps around a lot. It's tough to get it in the right spot. If you hold down Shift and press the arrow, it moves in fractional increments.
That's huge.
So good. So Shift and the arrow will move anything in fractional increments to make it a little bit easier to adjust and get proper. Cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks.
No problem. Ms. Millard, question.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what I've been grappling with, and then I think that maybe one of the things we've learned might help with this. But I'm looking for a way to help my students do more of an impromptu conversation where they have a limited amount of time to respond to a question. Let's say that I posed to them. And so I'm wondering if I could do an autoplay on the screen on the Google slide, and then do a screencastify, have them do a screencastify over that autoplay. So as they see a slide come up with a question, you know, they have 10 seconds before it goes on to the next one. They have to respond. Would that work?
Yeah, I mean, totally. It would work.
Or maybe there's another way that's better. I don't know.
I mean, it's not that it's better. So it would totally work. It would just work in terms of sort of the direction and the human interaction. So what I mean by that is if we, and I'll share the screen again. So and I think it's a great idea. I'm going to just change this back to widescreen, 60 by 9. So what they could do is you could share the screen with, or share the file with them. And then they would, or you give them that timing. So let's say I do the post to the web. Let's say I want it to go every 15 seconds. So I take this, I copy this, I'll open it in a new window. What you would have to do is you would have to say to them, okay, I'm going to give you this file. You have to start your Screencastify. And once it starts recording, you have to hit the play button down here on the actual slide to get it to start that timing.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of that human interaction where you have to give them sort of those explicit directions.
Yeah.
The other tidbit to this is that in theory, they could just press pause. So what they could do is like, if you say, okay, all right, I'm going to be a good student. I'm going to click Screencastify, and I'm going to record the desktop, and I'm going to record the microphone so that, you know, it can hear me and whatever. So I hit record, and Zoom people is always in the way. I'm going to click on my screen and I'm going to press share. It's going to give me the countdown. So I'm recording now. So now what I have to do is I actually have to press play to get the timing on my thing to start moving. So now that's a play button, or a pause button rather. So now in theory, yes, I can answer the question before the slide moves. However, there's nothing to stop the student from then clicking the pause button on the next slide to like answer the question and then manually advancing it. So totally possible. There's just kind of sort of workarounds where they wouldn't necessarily locked into a fixed time.
Okay.
And then I'll stop sharing. So it's just something to consider. I mean, it's definitely a great idea. And it's, you know, what you also might do is you might loop that in with something like a, and actually, you know what I'll do? Let me pause this. Let's get out of this. Sometimes there's just, with the Zoom is great, but sometimes there's just too many different windows going on and finding things.
Yeah, and if you have a better thought on how to do it without the workarounds, that would, you know,
yeah, because basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to have them basically do like a timed test, right? Or some sort of
yeah, kind of. I don't want to give them enough time to really, you know, I want it to be off the cuff. I don't, you know, I'm not looking for the perfect answer. I'm just looking for an immediate response.
Right. So the way to do something like that, if you're doing it, you know, it's a lot of this depends on purpose. You have to do a little trial and error, because you could do something like a Kahoot, you know, where it's like a timed quiz, but then they're not necessarily, that's more multiple choice. You're not necessarily hearing their voice or hearing them explain something.
Right. This is more geared towards speaking. I really still struggling with the speaking part, how to get them to have those conversations we have in school, but you know, but yeah.
So you could definitely do it. It would just be a matter of then when you're thinking about it, like, okay, like if I give them the instruction where it's going to auto advance every 15 seconds and they talk, if they pause to gather their thoughts, but they're speaking in the way I want to, what is more important?
Right.
Saying it or the amount of time they're saying it? So then maybe it becomes flexible where you're like, don't tell them about the ability to pause and restart, just see how it goes. But just know that you might get some kids who sort of pause just to verbalize or just articulate the point. And maybe that's fine, because maybe it's more important to hear what they said instead of the time. I would definitely try it. And this is a perfect thing. I think it's a great idea. And this is the type of thing that I would be like, do this week. Like if you can.
Right.
Throw it out there and let them know it's going to be messy, but you have this idea of this thing you want to try. I think that's like a great May, June, especially when we're in school and can actually do it together. I think that's one of those great May, June activities where you're like, I don't know if this is going to work. And like the Heathcote teachers on here will sort of back me up on this. Like I say that a lot. Like we'll do things in class where I'm like, all right, guys, I don't know if this is going to work, but we're going to try it and we're going to see. And sometimes when it does work, then that becomes like a regular part of what we do going forward. But then there are other times where I'm like, all right, so we got nothing done today, except we learned that that doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, and so you be honest with them and test it out. And this would be the time when normally, traditionally, you know, when things are kind of slowing down. Whereas I would say that'd be a great just kind of wing it activity and see what happens.
Yeah.
So that is a great idea. And I think it could definitely work. You just got to play around with the sort of the nuance of all the different steps.
Right. Thanks.
No problem. What else? What else are people wondering about or struggling with? Because what I will show is, since we did do that, is I will show the Screencastify. So since we
I have a question.
Yeah.
If I uploaded a video to YouTube as unlisted, will it still play automatically in the slideshow?
It will. Unlisted is basically
That you can't search for it.
correct. So yeah, unlisted is like anyone with a link, and if you put that on your Google site in a Google Slides, something like that, that's essentially effectively giving the link to somebody. It just means that, right, they can't go to YouTube and type in, you know, Miss Chung's math lesson and find it. So it's like hidden, but accessible. That's the big thing. YouTube, if it's restricted or if it's private, you can share a YouTube video in the same way you would share a Google Doc, where it's on YouTube as the host, but nobody can see it unless you actively share it with them. But unlisted is good. Like if you don't want to actually be like a searchable person or have your content searchable on YouTube, unlisted is a great way to go because it'll never actually appear there for the general public, but it lives there and it's public there for you just to grab the links and disseminate however you want to. Cool. So I'll jump in. I'll share the Screencastify stuff real quick because we just recorded that. And when Screencastify records, it records and you can save it to Drive automatically. I have not gotten very good about this whole trimming thing, but you're able to trim the ends, meaning like when you start this, you know, you may be in a situation where the video, you know, they're moving stuff around, they're going full screen, they're messing around with stuff. It may not matter, you know, like Melanie, you were talking about like with your students and doing the different things. It may not matter to have a little bit of funkiness at the beginning and a little bit of funkiness at the end because it's not about that. It's about the voice. But there is an editor where you can open the video in an editor and do a little bit of minor editing in Screencastify and tweaking it. This would be more if you wanted to cut out stuff for your own purposes. Like if you recorded a lesson and you wanted to just sort of trim out the beginning and trim out the end where you're sort of starting the presentation and the recording and where you're finishing it. And literally it's just like dragging it like that just to shorten the video and then exporting it. And then you could export it back to Google Drive. You could save it to your desktop as an MP4, which is handy if you're going to YouTube. Because even though YouTube and Google YouTube is a Google service, there's no way to do a direct Google Drive to YouTube upload. So you can play around with the editor. We in Scarsdale have the premium version of Screencastify, which includes the full editor and stuff for elementary school, possibly middle school. No, not middle school because you guys have the iPads. I think the high school might have Screencastify Pro. I don't know about the other districts that are taking this class. Screencastify does give you some minimal editing tools and stuff in the free version, and you get to save like 5 free videos. And that's where the YouTube aspect comes into play, because if you make it in Screencastify, once it's done, you can save it and export it to like your desktop and upload it to your YouTube channel, and then you can delete it from Screencastify, so then you can record a new one. So depending on your access. But I know at least at the elementary level in Scarsdale, we have Screencastify with students through, I believe, the end of next school year, and possibly at the high school as well, but we'd have to double check on that. And since the middle school uses iPads, they can't use Screencastify because they have different they can just do their own screen recordings on the iPads and stuff like that and edit in iMovie and those types of things.
Chris, I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
When you were doing Screencastify and your picture was down the bottom right-hand corner, you could still see like all of your tabs on the top and that sort of thing. How can you get it in present mode, get your slides in present mode and still have the picture of?
You can't.
Okay.
So if you want your picture there, the way to do it, if you want your picture, no.
Zoom with yourself? Oh, okay. That's what I do, but I thought maybe.
No, you could. What I would say you do is, like, I had those other tabs, but like when I was here, what I would do is you would just have just this tab. So yes, you would see the tabs. Like when I'm doing this, when I go to Screencastify, I have the webcam enabled. But then what you could do is you can, minimize your dock. If you're on a Mac, you could even go to the, where is it? No, it's the dock settings. They move the dock settings, but you can hide the dock and stuff. But you could do it like this. So then that way you're in sort of present mode in the sense that you don't have the slide deck on the left and you don't have file edit and view. But when you do this and record, you get the little camera down here. And then this is just a matter of like, what are you willing to forgo or what are you willing to live with? So we see one tab and we see us or me, you as the teacher. The problem is if you go into traditional present mode, you'll lose this particular thing. So, what's sort of more important or what's, more valuable? Is it the full screen so they're not seeing anything? Or is it, in this case, I'm only seeing the one tab up here. So yes, I see all the other stuff, which is totally distracting, 100%. It's just, which is the lesser of two evils. You could also use Zoom to record.
Yeah, that's what I was doing, but I thought maybe it would be easier.
And what's the difference between that and a Jamboard?
Jamboard is just a different app. I mean, Jamboard's sort of a Google app that originally came out of their physical boards. Like Jamboards are actually physical, like interactive whiteboards that Google made. The app uses that premise because when the board came out, part of the Jamboard's physical thing was you could be in a room using the tools, but people could also be on their mobile devices interacting with the board. So the Jamboard app has some more of that stuff. It does do other things like bringing in multimedia and stuff like that. So you play around with it and see. I would say for things when you're trying to do like recording video, you sort of stick with things that specialize in the video. So like Screencastify is just about like screencasting, like that's what it does. Zoom is video conferencing, so it handles video really well. When you start using other apps that kind of combine, whiteboard and video and all these other things, you can kind of lose some quality or reliability in one versus the other, or it may not look as great as the other one because it's more of a robust app as opposed to something that specializes in one thing, which is sort of like hosting in Drive. Like you can totally put a video in Drive and give people the link and it'll play out of that. It just usually doesn't always play well. It buffers, the quality is a little bit less, doesn't look as good because it's got like a drive window around it. But you know what? If you like the workflow, I mean, that's the other flip side to this. Is like if you like Jamboard and the way you use it for different things, use it. Like Kathy, like you like Zoom and recording, just use that. Like there's not necessarily, I mean, some tools are better than others. Like YouTube is a better video host than Drive, but it's not to say that like the other thing can't work for you if you're comfortable with it. I don't have a ton of familiarity with Jamboard only because it hasn't done enough for me to make me move away from other apps that I use.
Hey, Chris, one quick thing about screen recording.
Yeah.
I guess kind of on the plus side for screen recording is you could do the present mode, which is nice, but then you don't have that video of yourself, so the kids can't see that. So that's a downside to it. But I also like screen record on the iPad if you have an iPad available to do that, because then you can also write.
Yes.
Like I can write and talk and then let the kids take notes or whatever if they have the PDF version. So there's pros and cons to both both
Yes.
ways.
Totally. And there's, I mean, at the elementary level, we have Seesaw, and Seesaw is a real primary K2 sort of strength app, but it's definitely usable in upper grades as well, because it's a very robust app, and it gives you a whiteboard feature where you can draw and stuff. And then, yeah, so there's definitely there are different ways to do it. And right, it's about sort of finding sort of the nuance of what works, because Seesaw, if you have an iPad, you can affect the same result, because Seesaw gives you the whiteboard functionality with the ability to record voice while you're actually writing. So you can do that, which is nice. One of the problems with Seesaw and that stuff is in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, we use Chromebooks. So you lose that touch, you lose that tactile interface with that. So yeah, I mean, the iPad, being able to record directly on, which is why we use iPads with K1 and 2. And that was also why there was a big advocacy for iPads in 6 in the middle school, was because it gave you that ability to have that tactile interface and have that sort of handwriting aspect of it, to make it sort of a better mix of that analog digital vibe. What else? Is there anything I've missed? Is there anything people think that they've came here expecting to see or learn about and have not? I know we didn't spend a whole lot of time on bullet points and text boxes, but that was kind of the point to this, was to think about slides in a different way, where we're not just kind of boring step by step.
If I publish it to the web and then I make changes on my original, do I have to republish it then?
Nope. It'll go automatically. And there used to be, let me see if Google recently updated their sharing interface. If you notice, when you go to share right now, it looks different.
Yeah.
And then if you change it from anyone with the link, you could still put in the, to copy the link, and you could change viewer stuff. But now, you only get 3 options instead of the 5 or 6 that they used to have.
Mm-hmm.
So things have been tweaked, but there used to be, let's see if it's still there, published to the web. On some of them, so maybe it's on a Google Doc. So this does do it, but on a Google Doc, let's see, I think it gives you the option, or it used to give you the option to republish immediately. Yeah, see, on a Google Doc, there's actually a checkbox for automatically publish when changes are made. I don't think Google Slides needs that. I think that does that. Yeah, it auto republishes. The only thing I would say is, if you're doing something on the fly, meaning, let's say you put this up and you're talking to your class and you're like, oh my God, I totally forgot something. Let me make the change right now. If the class is looking at the file while you're making the change, they should reload the page after you made the change. It's instant, but it's not so instant that it pushes it out to them. They would just have to reload the link that they were on in order to see that change take effect.
And if I ever wanted to have, I don't know, one that auto played and maybe one that didn't with other, something like that, those had to be copies and then their own. And then you said if I wanted to share with a class, so they could actually work on add stuff to it as a class, I would have to make them able to edit. I mean, I'd have to be careful with that type of thing, right? It'd be something that they would write in, and they all had a part, but I still would publish that as to the web versus just a regular a regular slides presentation, so they can actually just go through it, right?
Well, so there's a lot of stuff going on there. So if you want them to edit it, you're not publishing it to the web.
Okay.
You're going to do a straight share with them. Okay. You can still publish it to the web, if you wanted to show it on your web page as an example, but when you wanted them to actually go work on it, they need the share link as an editor to do it.
Got it.
And yes, if you share it with your class, then you could potentially have 20, 30, whatever it is, editors all at once jacking up the world.
Right.
Be careful with that. If you have something
a specific use, where they were each be responsible for a slide or a collaboration or something like that was controlled, right?
Something like that. And I've found, and granted, I'm elementary school, so it's a different dynamic in terms of situational awareness and personal responsibility from 2nd graders to high school. So we tried this with 2nd graders, where we gave the entire 2nd grade class one Google slide deck. and we assigned teams of 2 to a slide. They were doing a class newspaper. And we're like, yeah, this will totally work. It totally did not work. It was an absolute dumpster fire because like you had, 20 second graders, and it was fine because they're second graders, right? It was their first experience with Google. Like they sort of knew what to do, but like they were moving stuff around. Fine. So it didn't work. So then what we did was we made one slide deck with like essentially one slide for each team. They just shared it with those 2 kids. They worked on their particular 1 or 2 pages of their newsletter. Once all those were done, I just went in and I just copied all those individual slides and pasted them into like a final single slide deck. So that's a way we can kind of approximate that. Like you can make a folder, and in that folder is sort of like your master one that's shared with nobody but you. And then there's a different slide deck for each of the groups. And then once each of the groups are done, you copy those individual slides and then you paste them. And because remember, if I come over and I do this, I'll share my screen. And if I come over and I do this, if I take this and I copy this slide, I'll copy this slide and I'll put this slide over here. It's going to ask me if I want to link. And what that means is if I link this, I have this little button up here that tells me it's linked. So now if I come over here and let's say I add a shape, I come back over here, it's going to tell me, it's going to give me this update button that tells me that this slide has been updated on the original file. So and I can click update and then the information comes in here. Where this would prove useful in your context is you could have your master and then the kids are working and then once they're like, oh yeah, I'm done, you paste them into your original. But then if they go back and work on it, you could look at your original as long as you did that copy and link. You could see if any of them say update, and then you click the update and you know that you're getting the new data in. That update doesn't go both ways. It only goes from the original to where you copied it. So if I made a change on that new location, it will not go the other direction. Does that make sense?
And if my last question would be on the same idea of copying and pasting, if I wanted to have a slide that was horizontal and then one that was 8.5 by 11, and I copied it, I had a separate slides presentation in one format and then one in the other, could I then potentially copy it in so it would be, because I know you can't do it in one presentation, but can I copy it into that format and it'll keep it horizontal or vertical or
it should. And if I change this, because as long as you tell it to keep the original formatting.
Okay.
So let's see, if I take this and I do that, and now if I copy, now my slide's all jacked up, but it's all good. If I copy this and if I paste this into here now, and if I do keep original.
Oh, right. Okay.
No, it doesn't do it. It forces
it.
It forces it into the new one, which makes sense because it doesn't want to have the 2 rotations.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's gonna be weird. Okay.
Yeah. So that's funky, but so yeah, that doesn't work. I don't know what I've ever done. I think usually if I ever have to rotate things like that, what I'll do is I'll have 2 different ones. And then when I download them, what I'll do is I will open them up in Preview, or in Acrobat, and then because in Acrobat or in Preview you can rotate individual pages, and I'll just go through and I'll rotate the one and I'll just copy and paste and build them together to merge the 2 PDF files essentially.
Thanks.
No problem. What else? Did somebody else have a question? All right. So what I'll do is I will show you one last time so the blog has all of the recordings, and then this recording will be up. I posted this one, or maybe did I update it? Let's see. It should be up there. Session 5, which is last Thursday. And then, yep, so session 5 is up there. So all 5 sessions are up there. I'll have this session up in a little bit. There's also this presentation, which has some basic things that we've been talking about, some of the basic things like with Google Drawing and stuff like that. The participant projects, this is where you're going to put in your name, a link to the project, either the folder or the specific file. And then the notes are just a brief explanation about what it is. And either way is cool. I'm totally down with you putting the folder in and just saying, hey, there's a bunch of unfinished stuff in here. That's fine, because this is about you sort of exploring and learning new things and trying things out. It's also fine if you're like, here's this virtual classroom I did and it's like crazy bananas. That's fine too, because that means that you found something that you really like dug into. I figured either way it's valuable because you've seen a variety of things you could pull from, or you've seen one that you're really like working on for immediate implementation. And I think either way is valuable, especially this time of year where you can think about doing something or how you may want to change up and do things for next year. Cool. Everyone good? And then once you're finished with whatever that is, and you don't even have to put it in, if it's not finished because you're working on the virtual classroom for September, for August, put the link in and then just put that in the notes. Like, I'm still building this, I'm still working on it. And then, just make sure you do the survey. Cool.
Chris, do we have to still email you, Fran, and Anne-Marie just saying like we've completed, we've embedded our things or anything? No?
Just shoot me an email when you're done. You don't have to email them. Share it with them just so they have access to the folder or the file. And then what I always do is I then will let Fran know and Anne-Marie know when everything's in there. Okay. And then I'll send them that document.
Oh, there's Anne-Marie.
Okay.
Hi.
Cool.
Sorry, I've been listening in.
Hi.
Hello,
I
Anne-Marie.
did get some things that were shared by people. If possible, if you could just write something that explains what it is, like what grade level it's for.
That's in the notes document.
If someone does ask me for a project to confirm that you were in the class, and I just give them a random.
No. So you just jumped in. I'll show you, Anne-Marie. What you're gonna get is like what I always give you, which is this.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So
yeah.
they're gonna put their name in, a link to their project, and a brief explanation of what it is. Like, it's a folder with a whole bunch of stuff that we tried out, or it's the one file that I did a ton on. But what they're doing is they're sharing, when you jumped on, they're sharing view access with you and Fran. So that way, when I send you guys this document, you'll be able to click on the links and actually see the thing.
Got it. Yeah. Sometimes we get projects and it's just kind of random resources and we don't know what grade it's for or what subject sometimes. So it helps if you just note it on there.
Yeah, put it on there, and then I'll let you. I was going to let you. Yeah, and I was going to let you guys know when that's filled out and when everyone's good on that.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.